This week on Kayak Bassin', Chad Hoover is taking his hunt for big bass north across the border to Canada's Ottawa Valley, where he's hooking up with local angler and Kayak Bassin' producer Ken Whiting. With thunderstorms rolling through the area, the guys are ready to get wet while exploring a section of Clayton Lake, which is only accessible by kayak or canoe.
Whoa, wasp nest. Just tapping it. I got more salad than bass.
He's a fat little guy. He's definitely, look at the belly on him. Beep, beep. No brown tail though. I don't know why you get all the brown tail ones. I think you scared the poop out of him.
See that bullfrog? I've had bullfrogs eat topwater frogs before like that. Right there. Golly. Did you see that? Ladies and gentlemen, that's a new twist on frog fishing. This is the chicken of the swamp right here. That's a good meal. Yeah, right there. That back meat and that meat on the legs is a good meal. He didn't just sort of inadvertently get hooked. He pounced on that thing. So, if you ever worry about throwing a frog too big, don't, because that's what bass are used to eating right there. So one of the cool things that they do here in Canada that they don't do in parts of the US where I'm from is they have bass seasons and they have sanctuaries that are protected areas for spawning. You know, in the Southeast, the spawn is when we actually get out there and try to catch that fish of a lifetime. But as you can see by the sign above me, and especially in this part of Canada and probably across the entire country, they have sanctuaries or protected areas, and they also have a bass season. When I got a call by my producer that said, hey, you want to come up to Canada for the bass opener, that was a foreign concept to me. I had never heard the term bass opener before, because that means it's closed. In the US, we fish for bass year round and we're not used to any kind of closed season. So it's pretty cool that Canada goes so far as to take measures to protect critical spawning grounds during the reproductive cycle of the bass to ensure future success and a viable population for generations to come.
Welcome back to Wilderness Systems Kayak Bassin'. This week, Chad Hoover has joined show producer Ken Whiting in Canada on his never-ending search for big bass.
My name's Ken Whiting. I'm the owner of the Heliconia Press. We're a production company. We do outdoors production primarily. Our roots are in paddle sports. We started off with whitewater and have, over the past 12 years, have branched into all types of paddle sports. The model has always been, you know, you can shoot instruction, for example, in the backyard and effectively communicate the techniques, but it's not necessarily that fun to watch. So our model was always, hey, this is an opportunity to not only teach people but to inspire people. And so we go to top locations. And when we got into kayak fishing, that same rule applied. It's been our goal to not just teach people about kayak fishing and help people along that way, but to inspire them. And so with the show we do with Chad, the idea is to go to North America's top kayak fishing destinations. And in many cases, that's out of the way places, places that aren't necessarily top fishing destinations. They're places that you can't get to in a typical boat. They're places that require an adventure, require exploring, and that's one of the joys of kayak fishing. And it's one of the things that drew me to kayak fishing when I didn't grow up as an angler. I didn't, my parents didn't fish, so you know, that's the biggest factor in getting started. So I didn't get started until I was in my mid-20s. And what really drew me to kayak fishing was that access, the ability to get to places that other people simply can't get to, like where we are right now. Of course, the other thing that drew me to kayak fishing was the paddling, the exercise, the self-propelled nature of the sport. It's you know, it's pretty cool. At the end of the day, you've explored a lake or a river system, and you've gotten back and you did it all under your own power. There's a sense of accomplishment there, and a sense of you know, feeling healthy. And for me, you know, I just love paddling. I've always loved paddling. I wonder if someday that'll get old. Will it? The day that gets old, getting a topwater bite in the lily pads.
35 years over here, and no.
I hope not.
All right, so let me take a second and give you a couple of tips on more effective topwater frog fishing, or topwater fishing of any kind for that matter. There's a little phenomenon that I like to call premature ejaculation, and I know that it's got a little bit of a negative connotation, but I say it to help folks remember that when you jerk that bait immediately upon the blow up, you're really not letting that bass take it. So there's a couple of things that you can do. One thing, I coined a phrase that Jeff Little made famous called not fishing with stone hands, and that means having a death grip on the rod. Choose a rod that's lightweight, that's a little bit longer than you normally would fish with, and fish with a really loose hand. In other words, you want to have maybe 2 fingers gripping the rod, and you want to have the ability for the fish to kind of take some. So you're using a soft hand, you maybe have the rod just balanced on your pinky, your fingers open, and reel with that rod tip up. And when that bass hits it, they can kind of tip it forward and jerk it out of your hand. What that allows you to do is that forces you to pause, regrip the rod, reel down, and set the hook. And it sets in that momentary pause that you need to let that bass really get a hold of that bait and turn so you can set the hook and get a hold of something, other than seeing the blow up, especially if it's that fish of a lifetime, and then you pull, the fish doesn't have a hold of it yet, and you jerk the fish out of its mouth. The second thing that you can do is choose a rod that's got a little bit slower action. The one that I'm using is a medium heavy 7'3" SMG from All Pro Rods. The Smallmouth Guru series is specifically designed to have a little bit slower action for smallmouth fishing. But what I find with this big rod is that it's got a nice, soft, deep parabolic bend to it, that even if you do decide to jerk early, the rod bends softly, bends deep, and gives that second delay built in before you jerk the lure out of the fish's mouth. So a good spinning reel setup, a long rod with a parabolic bend to it that's a little bit softer action, a little bit slower, a little bit more moderate. Use the technique to say set the hook in your head, to drop the rod tip, fish with a soft hand, and you'll catch more fish fishing for topwater bass, on frogs, or any other type of soft plastic buzzed across the surface. Get up out of there. Well, that didn't work out.
Welcome back to Wilderness Systems Kayak Bassin'. This week, Chad Hoover's looking for big bass in Canada's Ottawa Valley with Ken Whiting from the Heliconia Press.
Good fish too. Good fish. Get over here. Get over here. Get out of that grass. Yeah, buddy. That's what's up. That is what's up. Whew. Pretty good little fish. That fish burrowed down into that grass. And that's why you want a rod with a lot of power down at the bottom of that sensitive tip so you can muscle that fish out of the thick stuff. Well guys, I'm gonna need to get my raincoat on here and hunker down because we have a storm over our shoulder. Hey! And that's definitely the biggest fish we've caught today.
With a heavy thunderstorm rolling in, the guys pull off the water, which gives Chad the chance to share a special technique he uses for tying braid securely to your reel.
So let me show you how we do this. You start off with the end of your braid and you just do an arbor knot. You basically just do a knot. And the way you do this knot is you just take your main line and go back through your loop 3 or 4 times. That's gonna build the knot up big enough that it's not gonna slip. After you pull that down, just take your clippers and clip it off. Leave yourself about 1/4 inch. Now what you do is you simply open up your reel, take your spool out of the side. Set that down for just a second. You're gonna take your line and go through your worm gear or through your lime guide and come out the side of the frame of the reel. That way you can tie your knot to your spool, but when you put it back through, it's set up properly. Take this line and just go around the line and make an overhand knot, which is going to create what's known as an arbor knot, but it's just a fancy word for a slip knot. You simply pull that and it's going to slide. You can open it back up. Take that knot or that loop, place it over the spool. After you place it over the spool, take the slack out. Now, this next step is important because if you don't do it, the line is just going to spin around and around the spool and you're not going to get the friction that you need to run the braid onto the spool. This is why a lot of people use tape, back it with mono. This is also why a lot of people super glue it to the spool. But here's a quick trick that makes it easy to not have to do any of that, and it's also probably more secure. So just take your line and turn it over, make a loop. Bring it over one side of the spool. That's called a half hitch, if you're gonna look it up in a knot book. Do the same thing on the other side. Now the ticket to making this work effectively is that you do one on each side by alternating. Don't just do 2 on one side. So after I've done the second one on the first side, then come back, do the second one, whoops, do the second one on the other side. I'm gonna then hold the spool and I'm gonna work this back and forth until all of that friction tightens the whole thing up. Now what's happened is the 2 knots on each side have tightened up and created an X pattern, and my line is coming out of the center of that X. No matter how hard I pull, it's not gonna spin on that spool. Then just take your line that's coming out through the worm gear, pull the slack back out the front, then place your spool back inside your reel. Be careful right here not to get your line caught on the outside or you'll cut it or you'll nick it. Once you put it back inside the frame, simply close your reel up. Now, either with a buddy or just taking your spool and putting it somewhere to hold a little friction on it, you're just gonna, what I do is I create finger tension here. A lot of people wind this on through the rod, but I just put finger tension right there so I can wind it on with even, consistent pressure and fill my spool. So a good rule of thumb when you're spooling the spool, especially with braid, is to come with about 1/8 of an inch of the edge of the spool. Once you're done, just put this on your favorite rod, get out there and start catching fish.
Stay tuned for lots more kayak bass fishing action as the fishing turns on after a mid-afternoon thunderstorm. Welcome back to Wilderness Systems Kayak Bassin. Having dodged a few thunderstorms, the guys are back to enjoying a late spring topwater bite in Canada's Ottawa Valley.
There's a hook. There we go. That's not a bad fish. That was a great hit. That thing exploded on it.
Knock yourself out, buddy. Knock yourself out. What? That's fun right there. Fat boy. What a big old knot on his head now. Oh, don't you get hung up. Oh, I still got him. Looks like Ken is hooked up. Ooh, ooh. Looks like we're both hooked up. The little hit it at the bow action. Fish hit it as soon as it hit the water. I mean, I like to fish a light drag on a spinning rod, and then when I pull, you can simply palm the spool. So a lot of people ask me why I fish a spinning rod when I'm buzzing these plastics in there. One, you get a high gear ratio, so you can really buzz them and you change the speed, but you can fish a super light drag and you can palm the spool to give you more for pulling bass out of that thick stuff. These bass ain't monsters, but I'll tell you what, there's nothing like topwater bass fishing on days when most people are staying at the house. And again, that plastic would be through if I was using one of the screw lock type baits that most people use with this, but with this Impulse soft plastic from Mustad, simply poke it back in the nose, line it up, slide the hook back in it, and I'm gonna get 3, 4, 5 times as many fish per plastic as I would with any other type of frog hook. So you know what, those Mustad Impulse soft plastic hooks, when it comes to how much money they save you in soft plastics, pretty much pay for themselves. I'll tell you what, when you're in this shallow water like this and it's super clear and any boat movement sends out a pressure wave that spooks the fish, it's great to make super long casts. So what I'm doing right here is I'm using this super light Kansan braid and a 7'3" smallmouth Guru rod from All Pro, and I'm able to cast that frog way away from the boat. That allows me to get those presentations to those fish that haven't been alerted to our presence yet, and couple that with a little bit of Seaguar fluorocarbon leader for this clear water. These fish are destroying this frog. Hey guys, I gotta thank my producer Ken Whiting for having me up in his neck of the woods. You know what? Ken fell off of his mountain bike from a sitting position, ended up with 9 stitches and 19 staples in his leg, but he manned up and came out here for 2, 3, 4 days of rain, storms, dragging kayaks into the backwoods, and we had a great time, dude.
Wouldn't miss it.
Lots of topwater action. We swung for the fence and tried to get a monster muskie. We're this close to sealing the deal, didn't get it done. I'll be back next year for one of those big girls. Thanks for joining us this week on Kayak Bassin', and we'll see you for more kayak fishing action.